Now about sex. This is me. Many of us needed an overhauling there. Above all, we tried to be sensible on this question. It's so easy to get way off track. Here we find human opinions running to extremes, absurd extremes perhaps. One set of voices cry that sex is a lust of our lower nature, a base necessity of procreation. Then we have the voices who cry for sex and more sex, who bewail the institution of marriage, who think that most of the troubles of our race are traceable to sex causes. They think we do not have enough of it, or that it isn't the right kind. They see its significance everywhere. One school would allow no man flavor for his fare, and the other would have us all on a straight pepper diet. We want to stay out of this controversy. We do not want to be the arbitrator of anyone's sex conduct. We all have sex problems. We'd hardly be human if we didn't. What can we do about them? That's the question. They're going to ask me to make another damn list. We reviewed our conduct over the years, so I made a list of people I had relationships with. For me, it was the opposite sex. But I found I just didn't put everybody I had sex with. There was a lot of one-night stands, and I couldn't remember their names, so I put the ones that lasted more than a few days, the long-term relationships, a week or more. And some of them I'd had sex with, most of them I had, some of them I hadn't. Maybe I just had wanted to and didn't get my way, but I guess that list comes from prayer. And I said a prayer, and I found myself making a list of people that needed to be on that inventory that because it says in the next paragraph below the directions, it says, we subjected each relation to this test. So I looked at my relations in a list. I reviewed my conduct over the years past. When I finished that list, I took the first name, and I didn't do this one in columns, I did it in paragraphs, and I just answered these questions. Where was I selfish? Well, I was selfish because I wanted her to. Where was I dishonest? Well, I was dishonest because I didn't tell her. Where was I inconsiderate? I was inconsiderate because I didn't think about her feelings. I didn't think about what she needed. So there's 3 questions. Whom did I hurt? And I would love to tell you that in the sex inventory, when they say we, they mean her too. I think they mean we because they were talking about more than one person in the program at the time, as they do throughout this book. I need to use I. Whom did I hurt? And it wasn't just the person in the relation. There were sometimes people around that relationship that got hurt too. Her kids, her husband, her parents. Did I unjustifiably arouse jealousy, suspicion, or bitterness? Where was I at fault? And then the one that probably should be marked to save you some time, and the one my sponsor told me not to write unless I wanted to change, because if I wrote this next part, I wouldn't be able to do what I used to do anymore, and that is, what should I have done instead? I'm sorry to say that with most of my relationships in the past before I got here, what I put there was I shouldn't have got involved with them in the first place. And some other stuff. But it's in there, that question, that I'm going to find my ideal for my future sex life, which the next part of this inventory is about. So we have a list of relations that I've had. We've taken the first name off that list, and I've answered question number 1. Where was I selfish? Where was I dishonest? Where was I inconsiderate? Who did I hurt? Did I arouse jealousy, suspicion, or bitterness? Where was I at fault? What should I have done instead? You answer those 9 questions for each relation. Now, I don't understand, and I've yet to have anybody explain to me where it says, did I unjustifiably arouse jealousy, suspicion, or bitterness? If I need to look at where I unjustifiably aroused those things, is there such a thing as justifiable jealousy, suspicion, or bitterness? And I don't think there is for an alcoholic. At least I have never found any for me that I could justify doing to someone. Then they tell me while I'm writing this inventory in the next paragraph, in this way I'm trying to shape a sane and sound ideal for my future sex life. I subjected each relation to this test. Was it selfish or not? I'm going to ask God to mold my ideals and help me to live up to them. Remembered always that my sex powers were God-given and therefore good, never to be used lightly or selfishly, nor to be despised or loathed. Whatever my ideal turns out to be, I must be willing to grow toward it. I must be willing to make amends where I have done harm, provided that I do not bring about still more harm in so doing. In other words, we treat sex as we would any other problem. In meditation, we ask God what we should do about each specific matter. The right answer will come if we want it. Now, I can't tell you from my experience how important that is, because in my third inventory, I found some stuff from the first two that I didn't want to change, and it didn't. When I wanted it to, and when it had beaten me up enough. I think if we treat sex like any other problem, and somebody hasn't seen what they need to see, and they're still out there messing around, I think you probably tell them the same thing you would if they weren't sure about alcohol. You know, go do it until you just can't do it anymore. Because if you're anything like me, whatever you're using to make you feel good, you use it until it doesn't work anymore. And if sex is still working for somebody, hey, go do it. Frivolous, meaningless, harmful sex, go do it. Go do it until it doesn't work anymore, and then maybe you'll be able to stop. Just, you know, kind of like alcohol. And I'm glad my sponsor loved me enough to allow me to have my own experience. You know, I'd go to Don, and I'd say, Don, I saw this, and this, and what a breakthrough. And he'd say, well, I've been waiting for you to see that. And I'd say, well, why didn't you tell me? And he'd say, I love you more than that, because if I did, it would be like stealing from you. And I can't fix you anyway. And if you're anything like me, you don't stop doing stuff until you're ready to stop doing stuff. And I love you enough to let you have your own experience. The right answer will come if we want it. God alone can judge our sex situation. Counsel with other persons is often desirable, but we let God be the final judge. We let God be the final judge. We realize that some people are as fanatical about sex as others are loose. We avoid hysterical thinking or advice. Suppose we fall short of the chosen ideal and stumble. Does this mean we're going to get drunk? Some people tell us so. But this is only a half-truth. It depends on us and our motives. That's what this inventory is about. Seeing my past motives in relationships and choosing a new ideal for my future sex life. If I'm sorry for what I've done and have an honest desire to let God take me to better things, now there's a promise. See, I thought if I did this inventory, I was going to become dull, boring, and glum in areas of sex, and that God certainly wouldn't take me to better things in this area. But He has. We believe we will be forgiven and we will have learned our lesson. If we are not sorry and our conduct continues to harm others, we are quite sure to drink. This is not a theory. These are facts out of our experience. Was the director of the treatment center I went to said one time, and for a long time I didn't get it. He said, if you can continue to roll bums and stay sober, do it. And if you can continue to hustle prostitutes and stay sober, do it. And if you can continue to drink and stay sober, do it. To sum up about sex, we earnestly pray for the right ideal, for guidance in each questionable situation, for sanity, and for the strength to do the right thing. If sex is very troublesome, we throw ourselves the harder into helping others. We think of their needs and work for them. This takes us out of ourselves. It quiets the imperious urge when to yield would mean heartache. Now, I'd like to share two things about what happened to me when I started an inventory and stopped. And it was my first one because, you see, I believe that if I sincerely take the third step, that it goes much deeper than my head or my emotions. And it's almost like a part of my spirit has made a decision to move on. And if my head and my ego and my emotions stop me from writing, it's almost like my spirit goes on anyway. And I'm either going to watch the inventory on paper or I'm going to watch the inventory out here in my life. And when I balk at writing it down on paper, I see nothing but selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear out here in my life. And if I'm not centered in the inventory doing it on paper, I'm not centered out here doing in my life. So I got to the first inventory the first time and I started writing resentment and I got through it. And they kept telling me, once you start, don't stop. And I got to fear and I stopped. Not for real long, a few weeks. And I almost got arrested for some gambling that I'd been doing earlier on in sobriety. And I went to my sponsor with all this drama, and he said, oh, what a great thing to happen during a fear inventory that you won't finish. Because you'll either run or you'll finish it. That's your nature. And I got off my ass and I finished that fear inventory. And most of that fear was manufactured and it really wasn't about anything. But I'd worked it up into such a thing, I don't know what I was going to do. And you would have thought I would have learned my lesson, but I got to the sex inventory and I stopped again in the middle of it for a few weeks. And sure enough, on the same day, 2 women called me pregnant from what I had done sober. And I went to my sponsor with all this drama and he said, oh, what a great thing to happen in the middle of a sex inventory that you won't finish. You'll either run or you'll finish it, because that's your nature. And I got off my ass and I finished that sex inventory. And I would like to say that each inventory I've done since then, I learned my lesson and I just zoom right through it. But I don't. And I don't know why. And it gets less each time, the balking. Because every time I don't write an inventory, when I've sincerely made a third step decision, I watch the inventory in my life or I put it down on paper. And when I'm not writing and I'm not centered in the inventory, I'm not centered out in my life. You know, I'd go to Don and I'd say, this and this and this is happening at work. And he'd say, write some more inventory. And I couldn't see where writing inventory about my past had anything to do with me being crazy at work. But I guess that's just one of those spiritual things that happens in this process. When I was centered in the inventory, I was more centered in what was going on in my life. And when I wasn't centered in the inventory, I wasn't centered on what was going on in my life. That's all I have tonight. Thanks.